Hello, it's a pleasure to have all of you back with us in the law of karma, destiny, and choice. And today we will be looking at somewhat of a thorny issue. The episode is entitled Loneliness versus Solitude. If you think that you fall into either of these two categories or know somebody who does, perhaps somebody you care about, I invite you to grab yourself a seat and spend the next half an hour with us. I am here in the studio with Sister Denise, who is a mine of wisdom and spiritual knowledge. So hello and welcome back.
Hello Magla, thank you.
Okay, so solitude versus loneliness. Let's start with definitions. Okay, the bad news first. What is loneliness?
Loneliness is when you are really needing the company of others and craving it, and you feel depressed and sad and isolated, and you just want somebody to know that you're alive and to care about you and to love you and to just have company. It is natural, it is quite hard to be alone, and people naturally form couples, form families, form groups. Even people who are not married, they will have friends, they will have people in their lives that they can connect with anytime, and if you don't have that, it's a very, very difficult time. Sometimes when people move to a new place and they don't know anybody, they have to go through a period of loneliness, which can be very trying. Then they need to be maybe on the phone to their friends and relatives, and at least that will relieve the loneliness a bit. Then there are other people who are more loners.
Okay, so that's your definition of loneliness. Then you get individuals who fall into the other category who choose solitude. How do they differ from the first category?
The people who choose solitude tend to be people who are very internalized. They are inwardly directed. They love their own company. They may engage in activities that require concentration. They may be musicians, they may be writers, they may be poets, they may be photographers, people who like to go off on long walks by themselves, people who are not that much gregarious, they don't like parties and this and that. And of course there's a spectrum. I think everybody needs a certain amount of company, and if you are on your own for too long, it can be very trying. And sometimes in spiritual practice, you may do a special discipline of X number of days in solitude, in meditation. And I've experienced this. One time I did 90 days of solitude and meditation.
Why?
It was interesting. I was about 25 years old at the time, and I was in a new place. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have hardly any money, and I had this thought that if you want to set up a center for spiritual service in the tradition of Raj Yoga with the Brahma Kumaris, you always start a venture with tapasya, and tapasya is intense meditation. The Brahma Kumaris community began with 14 years of meditation, and so I thought, okay, I will do 14 hours a day meditation for 3 months, just out of the top of my head, and just see what happens. You find that it's quite difficult, and you go through different stages of resistance, of being uncomfortable. Sometimes you do really well. It's like a terrain that you're crossing, like a pilgrimage. you really need to be very steady and strong emotionally to manage that. And I found that I could manage it, and that I could get through all of the internal hardship that does happen. I could manage the external hardship, and I felt very, very empowered by the end of it. And certainly it was very empowering for me, because I had to cross a lot of internal terrain.
Am I right in understanding that solitude is healthy, whereas loneliness/isolation is not?
Yes, I think so. And I also think that solitude doesn't necessarily mean that you're in isolation. Solitude is that you take plenty of alone time within the context of other people, and you put it to them so that they can expect that you will disappear from time to time in your solitary work or your solitary walk or something like this. But definitely you will come in and out of human company, because otherwise you'll end up in isolation, and that will be psychologically and spiritually unhealthy.
So a certain amount of engagement with others is mandatory?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I've experimented a lot with this, and I am the kind of person who, I'm a project person. I tend to do things that don't require that many other people. I mean, here we are, there's several people involved in this, and we are together in conversation here. But then you see, before this, I would have been thinking about this and practicing this, and I'm speaking in these programs from my personal experience. If you want to study, you have to give time to sit down and read and think and process ideas. You're dividing your time. How much time are you going to be alone? How much time are you going to be with people? In my own case, I would put a big chunk of alone time and a relatively small chunk of social time. And different people will divide their time according to their own makeup. But I think everybody needs some alone time. Everybody needs some intimate time with close people. Everyone needs general time with general people. You have to have, I think, the whole spectrum for it to be healthy, spiritually and psychologically and socially. And if you understand yourself well, and you know the ratio of what kind of time you need, and you get it right, you can be very healthy, very comfortable, very happy.
In many countries in the world, being alone or forcing an individual to be alone is the worst type of punishment that can exist. Solitary confinement is a very well-known form of criminal incarceration. So why is it that the world outside equates being alone with punishment?
If you have done bad things, it'll be on your mind. And if you're alone somewhere in a prison, all you have is yourself and what you did, and it will be terrible to be stuck with that, and you can't get away from it. So it's a bad punishment. On the other hand, if you are someone who is in spiritual practice, and you cultivate solitude, and you have lots of pure karma, then when you're in solitude like this, and silence, you find yourself in communion with God, and this is a very beautiful experience. But whatever is your negative karma, it will come up, and it will plague you, But if you're in spiritual practice, part of your practice is to embrace that, to work through it and finish it. It's a kind of purging of any negative karma that may still be there. And the person who chooses solitude knows this, and they go through that and they get free from it.
Why is it that there are so many individuals who are afraid to be alone? The world is filled with examples of people who marry or who stay married to somebody that they're miserably unhappy with, because being alone is worse than being married to the wrong person. What is it about being alone that causes fear in the minds and hearts of many?
Perhaps they have this thought, what's going to happen to me? What if I fall down? What if, because there are stories of somebody who died and they were found 3 weeks later, nobody came to check on them. And I think that elderly people have this as a big thing. They have to deal with loneliness. It's a big issue, because in previous times you had extended families where the elderly were kept within the family, and then the elderly and the grandchildren were very healthy for each other. But nowadays, many times the elderly go into old people's homes, and they tend to get into situations of loneliness. So you get a lot of social workers who really specifically work to engage them, because otherwise they can just kind of fizzle out through inactivity.
Solitude, when done properly, is quite healthy, isn't it?
It's very healthy, but it's a discipline.
Okay, so tell us, how do you do it properly so that one doesn't go to an extreme? Throughout this show, you have been making reference to balance. I'm wondering how somebody who leads a solitary life does so in a state of balance.
I think from the beginning of their life, they would have developed and cultivated a very well-populated inner life.
Pause. What does that mean?
It means that from childhood, nobody has stopped you from daydreaming, thinking, just developing your inner life. I think one of the difficulties that has happened is that current society really tries hard to prevent children from developing their inner life, which is a very big tragedy, because then they're never able to take care of themselves in the inner world, and they can't handle solitude at all. You need to be free to cultivate this, and it's best cultivated from early childhood. So a child plays and does all kinds of things, and sometimes if a child is just sitting there, staring out and thinking, the adults will interfere with that and make them do something external.
So what is good about, use the word daydreaming, thinking, imagining in a child? What's good about that?
You're creating your inner world because you live in your mind.
You live in your mind.
And if you don't develop your mind from early childhood, then you live mindlessly. And that's not so good, because you're all dependent on television and this and that and the other, and you can't function when there's silence. But a person who has developed their inner world and they live in their mind, and their mind is full of poetry and music and fantasy and this and that in a very beautiful way, your creativity is activated, and then you're able to take that into the external world, and you have a very rich contribution. But if you don't have an inner world, you become somebody who is really needy and easily dependent and can't be alone and get scared of the dark and all sorts of things like this. So they're very weak in comparison with somebody who has cultivated their mind and populated it with all kinds of things, because truly you live in your mind and people don't get it.
Within spirituality, is solitude advocated?
Solitude is encouraged, because anyway, meditation is a solitary thing. Of course, you have meditation in the gathering, no doubt, but I need to have plenty of meditation alone, you see, so that I can be doing it for however much time I want. I don't need it to be guided or organized or with music or commentaries or this or that or the other. I don't like those things because I have a lot going on in my mind. And then I take myself into deep silence and deep solitude, and out of that comes new ideas.
What is the relationship between God and solitude? I'm thinking of this beautiful biblical expression, be still and know that I am God.
Well, that's so beautiful, because it's really in deep stillness and silence that you have your encounter with God. You know, in monasteries, the mystics are always, alone in their room or on their mountain, far away from the busy world, and you go deeper and deeper and deeper. I think that being close to nature also contributes to a healthy solitude, because if you think about wildlife, most of you're from Africa, so it's the world of lions and tigers and all of this. Well, there are many creatures that are in herds. There are also, especially the cats, they also are sometimes alone, and alone with the silence of nature is filled with a certain mysterious power, which is inspirational, where you're in touch with the feeling of eternity, or you're alone with the moon and the stars in the desert, and you realize how small you are and how great the universe is, and that you're part of it. There's many things that happen which are very, very deeply healthy, spiritually, psychologically healthy for a person to engage in that time, and it's very strengthening. The last thing you do in your life is you die, and you do that alone. You have to prepare for that.
And yet so many fear dying alone.
Even if there's lots of people there, you go, they don't.
Okay, so there's a healthy state of being alone, which is solitude, and there's an unhealthy state of being alone, which is isolation and loneliness. Loneliness is called the cancer of the 21st century, with reason, I guess. If one is lonely and isolated, what does one stand to do if you're in circumstances where there seems to be no solution? I read in the UK Daily Mail within the last 2 years that a staggeringly high percentage of individuals living in UK over the years of 60 years have absolutely no one to talk to except the cashier at the supermarket, and that's for those who are able to go to the supermarket. They have no one to talk to. What does one stand to do? And the reason I'm asking this is because often loneliness and isolation seems to be circumstances that are imposed on one rather than what one chooses?
Let's look at it also from the angle of karma. If throughout your life you have cultivated relationships, they will still be there as you get older. And relationships have to be continuously cultivated, so you need to give yourself time to write to people. In the old days, we used to write and put a letter in the mailbox, but now it's a little SMS, you know. But I think that it's very important. Communication is very important. If you cultivate relationships, even through electronic media, this is going to be very good to alleviate some of your loneliness. Books, reading books is very important, but it's also very important to create friendships, to create relationships, so that there's people who are interested in you, and you have done such karma with people that they feel inclined to visit you and see how you're doing and so on. But if you have not cultivated good relationships, then one of the consequences of that is you end up all on your own.
So you're saying it takes a lifetime to cultivate relationships that last a lifetime.
You're cultivating relationships, and they will endure, and they will still be there for you at the end of your life. Yeah.
What are your words for people who are suffering and struggling with loneliness and isolation because of circumstances and because of their own karma? How does one alleviate that pain? I'm not sure if I can give a solution for that, because everybody's situation is different. You know, for many, if you have an animal, that's very good company. Yeah.
Then you have to take care.
Yeah.
You know, I even have come across people who were incarcerated who make friends with a mouse or a cockroach or something like that. You know, because relationship is really key in a human being's life. There's a lovely section in the film called The Green Mile about a prisoner who was really suffering, and when he got a mouse, that, you know, there was an interaction of love and attention, and this carried him across some very severe difficulties. One's relationship with nature is very important. Nature is very nurturing in all kinds of different ways. And older people within the family situation, there's grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and there's a very important connection between the elderly and the children, which is very good for both. One of the problems of broken families is that the people get circumstantially isolated because of the broken families.
Thank you. So there you go, solitude versus the loneliness. Sister Denise has shared which one of the two is healthy and which is not, and how to manage both so that you're not in danger in any way. I hope that today's episode has found some resonance with you, to use a term that Sister Denise uses often, and I hope that you're able to appreciate your life situation, no matter what it may be. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Goodbye.